You didn't grow up too fast by accident. You grew up too fast because someone had to, because when the adults couldn't carry it, you did. Not because you were stronger, not because you were ready, but because something in your environment required it. Children don't step into adult roles without a reason. They do it when stability is fragile, when grief enters a home, when addiction or depression take over, when conflict fills the air, when a parent dies and everything changes overnight. A child adapts. And sometimes that adaptation looks like maturity. Sometimes it looks like perfection. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like silence. But underneath all of it is a child trying to keep everything from falling apart. And when you are that child, you don't experience it as sacrifice. You experience it as normal, as necessary, as the only way things function. You don't think, I'm losing my childhood. You think, this is just how it is. A child is supposed to wake up without carrying the emotional weight of the house. They go to school. They complain about homework. They play with their friends. They cry, and someone else holds it. When they feel overwhelmed, a nervous system stronger than theirs absorbs the storm. When they fail, the world stays intact. When they're scared, a voice says, I've got you. That's how it's supposed to go. But not every child grows up that way. Some children wake up already scanning the room, already measuring tone, already calculating what kind of day it will be. Before they brush their teeth, they are regulating the emotional climate. Maybe you became the responsible one. When money was short, you worked. When arguments escalated, you intervened. When your mother collapsed, you stabilized the room. When your younger brother lost control, you handled it. You were the one who took over. You didn't just sense tension, you managed it. You made sure there was food. You made sure things didn't fall apart. You made sure everyone else could keep going. Not because you were asked, but because if you didn't, no one would. And over time, that awareness moved into your body. Hyper alert, hyper capable, hyper responsible. You weren't just responsible, you became the structure. And slowly, everyone in the house leaned on you. Your parent leaned on you. Your brother and sister leaned on you. The whole household depended on you. And when a child becomes the structure, there is no one left to hold the child. Maybe your adaptation looked different. If you achieved, things felt calmer. If you performed, you were safe. So you became exceptional. High standards, low tolerance for mistakes, a constant need to get it right. If I fail, something will fall apart. And that pressure doesn't feel dramatic. It feels logical, necessary, like the glue holding everything together. Or maybe your role was louder. Maybe you became the problem, the angry one, the emotional one, the one who pushed back. In families where tension isn't processed, it lands somewhere, and sometimes it lands on one child. You carried the conflict. You expressed what no one else would name. You became the visible symptom of an invisible imbalance. You were blamed for the chaos. But sometimes the scapegoat isn't the cause. Sometimes they are the signal. The system needed somewhere to place what it couldn't metabolize, and you were strong enough to survive carrying it. Or maybe you weren't pushed to grow up too fast. Maybe you weren't allowed to grow at all. Independence felt threatening to someone. Autonomy created insecurity. So you stayed small, available, needed, not because you were incapable, but because your dependence kept something else intact. You learned that shrinking preserved connection, that not outgrowing someone protected the bond. When a child adapts like this, something subtle forms. Instead of developing from safety, you developed from adjustment. You learn. My value is in what I give. My safety depends on how well I perform. My belonging is tied to my role. My needs are secondary. You don't form an identity around who you are. You form it around what you carry, and it works. You become competent, capable, emotionally literate, responsible beyond your years, until you grow up. Now you're an adult, but maybe you're still the responsible one. The first person people call, the one who fixes, the one who absorbs. Maybe you choose partners who need you, not because you want to rescue them, but because somewhere deep inside, being needed feels familiar. You learned early that your role was to hold everything together. So when someone struggles next to you, your nervous system doesn't hesitate. It steps in. Because that's what you were shaped to do. And often, you don't even notice it happening. It feels automatic, instinctive. Maybe you're successful, but tired. Maybe you're independent, but afraid that if you stop holding everything together, something will collapse. Afraid that if you rest, if you don't respond, if you don't anticipate, you will lose your place. That child didn't disappear, they just grew taller, and they are still scanning, still anticipating, still bracing. You were not a difficult child. You were an adaptive one. You sensed what was fragile, and you responded. You carried what was heavy, because no one else could. That doesn't mean it was fair. And it doesn't mean it was yours. There is grief in realizing that. Grief for the softness you didn't get to experience. Grief for the safety you didn't get to internalize. Grief for the version of you that never had to become the strong one. Healing doesn't always begin with confrontation. Sometimes it starts smaller, not stepping in immediately, not fixing everything, not absorbing someone else's mood, not carrying what isn't yours. Just noticing, this feels heavy, and asking gently, is this mine? You were a child, not a solution. You were never meant to carry the world. You were meant to be held in it. And maybe the strongest thing you can do now is let something fall that was never yours to hold. Maybe strength isn't carrying everything. Maybe strength is allowing yourself to be the one who is held, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels uncomfortable. You were never meant to grow up this fast, and you don't have to keep growing at the speed of survival. You're allowed to slow down now, and maybe the only thing that truly matters now is not fixing that feeling, not explaining it, but turning toward it, toward the younger part of you who never got to be held, the part that learned to stay quiet, to stay composed, to not need too much. That part doesn't need discipline. It doesn't need solutions. It needs warmth. It needs to be seen without being corrected. It needs to feel that its sadness is not too much, that its emotions are not inconvenient, that nothing about it has to be minimized to be loved. And when you begin to sit with that part, not rushing it, not silencing it, not managing it, something softens. Because healing isn't forcing yourself forward. It's giving yourself now what you once had to live without. Attention, compassion, presence. And in that presence, the child in you doesn't disappear. It finally gets to exist.